Well, welcome to the 700 Club. From Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe, thousands of refugees are coming to America. President Biden is now set to quadruple the all-time low cap of 15,000 put in place by President Trump.
So who is standing by to help these new refugees transition to life here in the U.S.? Senior international correspondent George Thomas has the story.
Although the president may have felt pressure to allow an additional 47,500 refugees into the country this year, his decision is welcome news to faith-based agencies working to resettle these vulnerable people.
We're supposed to serve the widow, the orphan, the foreigner. Well, hey, we've got the opportunity right now.
One such group is Bethany Christian Services, which had to cut outreach and even offices as refugee numbers dwindled under the Trump administration.
It's sending the right message that, you know what, the United States is open again for refugees.
The White House reversal coming after the president faced intense backlash from some congressional Democrats and human rights groups over his first announcement, leaving the Trump administration's ceiling of 15,000 refugees in place.
And Biden had said back in February that he planned to raise and lift the refugee cap. His administration notified Congress of their intention to do that back in February, but they never did.
Biden calling Monday's decision part of reasserting American leadership and American values. It is important to take this action today to remove any lingering doubt in the minds of refugees around the world who have suffered so much and who are anxiously waiting for their new lives to begin, the president said in a statement. Pulaski says churches have been preparing to welcome new refugees since the Biden administration took office.
As people of faith, as followers of Jesus, it's good news that we have churches lined up ready to serve vulnerable refugees.
Even with the previous ceiling of 15,000, only about 2,000 refugees had been allowed into the country as of March. Pulaski says the White House needs to move quickly to help those stuck in the pipeline right now.
Many of these people who are waiting have family here in the United States. So you may have a wife or some children that are overseas ready to be reunited with their family here in the United States. So it's essential that families are no longer separated.
Under the refugee program, thousands are expected to arrive from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe in coming months. This as the White House also plans to increase admissions to 125,000 in the next fiscal year. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, let me give you a statistic that shows that these numbers are actually just so much air. There's nothing really here. 170,000 people crossed our border in just 1 month, the month of March. So far, the first 3 weeks of April, those are the stats we have. It's another 120,000. So add another week in it, you're going to have another 160,000. So you get to these numbers, and the number of people, the migrants coming into America, is approaching 2 million this year. So to say we're going to lift the cap to 65,000 or to 125,000 is ignoring the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground is around the world, the message has gone out. There's a new president in town, and he doesn't want to enforce the immigration laws, and so now you get to come in. As much as he wants to deny that, this open border policy, ultimately, we can't afford 2 million people coming in. What's currently happening on the border is they're not even being scheduled for court cases. They're being released into America. That is the current policy. That's going to put strain on social services. That's going to put a strain on everything. Until we start saying we need to enforce our immigration laws. If you don't like them, well, then get Congress to pass new immigration laws. But you're obligated to enforce the laws that are on the books. In other news, another political stalemate in Israel. So what does this mean for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. For the third time in 2 years, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to form a new government. His mandate expired midnight last night. Israel's president, Reuven Rivlin, is meeting with various political parties to determine who should receive the next mandate to form a coalition. He's expected to choose Yair Lapid. His Yesh Atid party gained the second most seats after Netanyahu's Likud party. Well, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's legal team is petitioning to overturn his guilty verdict and give him a new trial. In their filing, Chauvin's attorneys cite multiple reasons, including jury misconduct. The filing reads, the jury committed misconduct, felt threatened or intimidated, felt race-based pressure during the proceedings, and/or failed to adhere to instructions during deliberations. This picture of one juror surfacing, showing him wearing a T-shirt with the words, "Get your knee off our necks," at an August rally commemorating Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 March on Washington. The jury convicted Chauvin of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Chauvin's sentencing is scheduled for June 25th, and he faces up to 40 years in prison. Well, Facebook is upholding its ban on former President Donald Trump. The company's oversight board continuing the prohibition put in place after the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley told CBN News that giving a company that much power is a threat to free speech and highlights the need for congressional regulation.
I think that it really is a sad state of affairs when free speech in America depends on the whims of a monopoly corporation. And that's what's happening here. I mean, this isn't a court. Let's be clear. This isn't like a court making a decision. This is a Facebook panel. And to listen to Facebook talk about it, you'd think that this was the Supreme Court of the United States. And the only reason people care is because Facebook is so powerful. Listen, if Facebook had a lot of competitors, then President Trump could just go to a competitor platform and say, all right, fine, forget you, Facebook. I'll go over here to this platform. The whole point is Facebook doesn't have any real competitors in this social media space. So what they do really matters because they're the only game in town for all intents and purposes. That is a problem. That's a monopoly. And that's why I think the best thing that we can do is break them up.
Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat also banned the former president from their platforms. Tuesday, Mr. Trump debuted a new online platform to communicate directly to his followers. From the desk of Donald Trump is a website featuring his comments, images, and videos. The communication, though, is one way, as visitors cannot post comments. Well, turning now to the coronavirus, with vaccination rates slowing down, President Biden is setting new goals and policies to keep up the intensity.
Our goal by July 4th is to have 70% of adult Americans with at least one shot and 160 million Americans fully vaccinated. That means giving close to 100 million shots, some first shots, others second shots, over the next 60 days.
The administration now directing participating pharmacies to offer walk-in appointments and redirecting FEMA resources to support more pop-up clinics, mobile clinics, and smaller vaccination sites. Nearly 105 million people are fully vaccinated here in the United States. That's nearly 1/3 of the U.S. population. Well, the battle over transgender and women's rights is heating up at the state level. Lawmakers taking steps to protect the rights of women and girls. As CBN's Charlene Aaron tells us, one transgender icon is making the case that biological boys shouldn't compete in female sports.
Across the country, multiple states are taking steps to block trans athletes from competing in girls' sports through new legislation. Many say it's a much-needed move to protect young boys and girls. More than 30 states introducing bills restricting trans youth from access to girls' sports. 7 states have laws or executive orders keeping transgender students from competing on girls' sports teams in public schools. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis promising to sign a similar bill into law in the Sunshine State.
Oh, yeah, we're going to protect our girls. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter, and they're both very athletic, and we want to have opportunities for our girls. They deserve an even playing field.
All of this in response to the Biden administration's executive order prioritizing transgender rights by opening up public school bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports to all students regardless of their biological sex. Beth Stelzer of Save Women's Sports applauds the wave of Republican-led legislation.
Men and women, nonpartisan alike, we can all see this is just a common sense issue. and it's a really good thing.
Recent comments from Olympic gold medalist and California gubernatorial candidate Caitlyn Jenner, who is transgender, is bringing more attention to the issue.
This is a question of fairness. That's why I oppose biological boys who are trans competing in girls' sports in school. It just isn't fair. And we have to protect girls' sports.
Hundreds marched in Asheville, North Carolina, protesting against proposed legislation barring trans girls from competing in female sports.
As a parent of a trans child, I'm scared for that.
Some accusing Jenner of playing politics, pointing out previous statements.
The Olympic Committee thinks it's fair. I'm fine with it, yes. Great. Yeah, because there's no issue, no big advantage.
Not true, argues Stelzer.
When we allow males to compete in female sports, it is the end of female sports. We already have males that hold female records, and it won't be long before, for example, college recruiters and coaches, they're going to see that, oh, that team has a male on it, and that's what gives them the advantage. I'm going to get a couple more males, and it won't be long, and we'll have all male female sports.
LGBTQ advocates say the data doesn't support that.
It is negligible difference when trans girls and trans women go through the proper medical process.
But track athlete Selena Soule and other women athletes in Connecticut disagree. In the last 2 years, 2 trans athletes have taken 15 Connecticut state championship titles competing in women's events. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thank you, Charlene. Gordon, it is an issue that is heating up.
Well, every once in a while you hear these news stories and you go, how in the world did we get here? I think the issue is a fundamental one. It's just fundamentally unfair to have a biological boy compete in a girl's sport. And at whatever level you're talking about, what's going to happen with college sports, what's going to happen with the Olympics. If you start figuring out as a coach that, okay, I can get biological boys to compete in women's sports, at the end of the day, you're going to no longer have women's sports because the biological boys are going to be physically stronger and faster. So these things are just, part of the biology. And so what does that mean for college sports? What does that mean for the Olympics? And ultimately, if you're talking about the end of women's sports, I think you're talking about something that's fundamentally unfair. It's really strange to me that Caitlyn Jenner is leading the fight on this and saying it's fundamentally unfair. I think we need to listen to.